Welcome back to another sci-fi episode where psychology and finances collide. We're going to continue to examine how we think, feel, and behave with money as it relates to chronic financial pain. So again, welcome back to the Financial Pain Management Clinic. Now, in this episode, as we continue our financial pain clinic, I wondered what was missing. We've talked about cognitive behavioral therapy, ACT or acceptance and commitment therapy, mindfulness, behavioral activation, barriers to adherence to the treatment plan or financial action plan, and so much more. And some of these things are focused on deficits, psychological deficits, intellectual deficits, etc., personality deficits, focusing on what is wrong with us. And some are focused on what is right with us. And each certainly has its place. Even Freud said, psychoanalysis, after all, is to turn hysteria and neuroses into sizable unhappiness. That's kind of what pain management is overall. Let's take your physical, emotional, psychological, and even your financial pain and turn it into sizable or manageable discomfort. Now, some of you would turn this episode off very quickly and say, nope, if I can't be free 100% of discomfort, I don't even want to do this at all. But before you touch the dial, hear me out. This makes me think of Eleven on Stranger Things. She and Hopper had a special form of communication, and when he attempted to explain what a compromise was, he broke it down into the most basic and simplest of terms I've ever heard regarding compromise. Halfway happy is what he called it. I love that. Compromise is being halfway happy. And in the world of psychology, in the world of pain management, in the world of financial pain management as well, that's my job, is to at least get you to a place of halfway happy. Positive psychology emerged in 1998 when the originator, Seligman, became president of the American Psychological Society. And he wanted to move us away from this principle of deficit. Instead of focusing on what is wrong with us, focusing on what is right with us, to move us away from psychopathology, psychological illness, disease, disorders, towards flourishing, investigating the human condition and what's within our psychological and behavioral repertoires to flourish despite disease. Ooh, I just love that so much, because if I said that again, if we are financially flourishing, then we are investigating the human condition and what's within our psychological and behavioral repertoires to flourish financially despite financial chronic disease. And there's a quote that I really like by Baruch Shalem. He said, "There is nothing wrong with you that what is right with you couldn't fix." And again, that goes back to self-management. That goes back to self-efficacy. And working on those behaviors that you can control, working on challenging your thinking, your schemas. And there's another quote here by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, who is noted for introducing mindfulness-based stress reduction into mainstream medicine in 1979. He said something similar. As long as you are breathing, there is more right with you than wrong with you, no matter what is wrong. So what I've noticed is that clients look for the easy way, turning a blind eye to what easy really costs them. They will engage in something that will cause the least amount of discomfort. And a lot of times in the financial counseling session, it's learning that they've called a debt settlement company. And a lot of folks are lured into those contracts because they pretty much do the work for you, but you are paying a hefty fee that if you really looked at what you've enrolled and what you're paying towards the actual debt versus fees, it can get a little scary there. Again, they engage in something that will cause the least amount of discomfort. And it makes me think of sandpaper. When you're working with building, restoring, or painting things, you have to choose the right grit for the project. And there is this psychological phenomenon of personality grit that we will talk about in just a moment. But just humor me for a moment. I'm going to share a story. I inherited a beautiful porch swing from that my father and my brother built together. And I researched the steps to refinish it. And when I did, I was blown away and overwhelmed with all the steps. I just thought this would be a day project. Nope. This weekend project turned into a month project. So first, I had to start with an 80 grit pad of sandpaper for my hand sander. At least I had a power tool to save me some time with the hand sander. And the 80 grit, the very abrasive sandpaper pad, would remove the years of grime, mold, and mildew from sitting in a moist shed in South Alabama. I had to use something hard and do something hard to first remove the things that could continue to breed and fester if I just painted over it. These were live organisms that, if viewed in a petri dish, would make you just take that porch swing to the curb. That's what our finances look like sometimes. Too overwhelming and causing sickness after sickness, disease after disease that we just want to wash our hands of and give up already. But just like that porch swing, your finances still have value and worth to be saved and refinished, restoring its beauty, even if it will take the grit and hard work, and as my dad would call it, elbow grease, to get the original surface and bring it back to life. Some of us wish we could skip that initial step of 80 grit and move right to the 220 finer grit sandpaper. Or worse, just paint right over it. But even through these tasks, even though they seem overwhelming, I had to radically accept this was not just a day project, as I mentioned. It would take multiple days and turn into a month of restoring this and actually hanging it. And so, yeah, it took a lot of elbow grease to restore it to its former glory. And I got to tell you, though, taking the time to do it right was therapeutic. I admit that I cried in frustration a couple times because I didn't have the right tools for those hard-to-reach places. But if I just tackled 5 of those areas a day, it was still progress. When I finally finished sanding with a finer grit pad, preparing the wood to drink up that sealant, that was a glorious moment. And because of the elbow grease, following the proper sanding protocols, and taking my time, that first brush of sealant validated the work because the cedar wood sprung back to life instantly. The final product wowed my brother and father, but most importantly, I was proud of myself. Just like our finances, that swing will still require maintenance. It's out in the elements 24/7. So it requires a good sanding and fresh coat of sealant annually. But how nice to sit and bask in it during the spring and fall without splinters or a harsh feel or thinking I'm going to get sick. I got every bit of mold and grime and mildew off of it. So why this conversation? Well, let's talk about the grit scale. For the last couple minutes or so, I've helped you visualize grit through sandpaper imagery and perseverance imagery. The American Psychological Association defines grit as a personality trait characterized by perseverance and passion for achieving long-term goals. Grit entails working strenuously to overcome challenges and maintaining effort and interest over time despite failures, adversities, and plateaus in progress. Recent studies even suggest this trait may be more relevant than intelligence in determining a person's high achievement. I just love that whole paragraph there from the American Psychological Association. And I'll be sure to post the grit scale in the show notes so you can just take a fun assessment of how much grit you actually have. Because when we think about chronic pain, when we think about individuals in our lives that we've observed or gotten to know, or even ourselves, folks with chronic physical pain who seem to do so well and have learned to live well despite the pain, and to make something that is so uncomfortable and debilitating into something that can be somewhat comfortable and encouraging. That's grit at its finest. And from positive psychology's view, this is flourishing. That is what positive psychology focuses on. You can flourish in life despite the pain, despite your ability level, despite your income, despite your intelligence. Just consistently showing up and steadily sanding down your finances can be that thing. And the American Psychological Association states that grit may be particularly important to accomplishing an especially complex task when there is a strong temptation to give up altogether. And again, in financial counseling, in your financial action plan, it can feel overwhelming, just like that porch swing. And this grit can move us towards adherence to that financial pain management treatment plan or financial action plan. And just a little bit more about positive psychology. In positive psychology, you go from surviving to thriving to flourishing to optimal well-being. Again, despite the pain and discomfort. And this is characterized by what the theoretical approach of positive psychology posits with their acronym PERMA, P-E-R-M-A. And the practitioners and everyone that knows about positive psychology asks the question, are you permalicious? Are you flourishing? Are you working towards that optimal well-being? And you can have optimal well-being and still experience pain and discomfort. So here's what PERMA is, the acronym. P is for positive emotion. E is for engagement. R is for relationships that are positive. M is for meaning. And A is for accomplishments. This is a psychological state where you become just in a place where I can flourish. I can move again from surviving to thriving to flourishing. And even within positive psychology, there's this creative flow or psychological flow where it's a psychological state where you become so immersed, you lose all track and sense of time. Being absorbed in flow creates changes in the brain that increase emotion regulation, motivation that is intrinsic, where you are driven by internal reward. It also increases engagement, learning and skill development, performance, focus, and concentration. And that's exactly what we want when we are seeking financial counseling and we're actually wanting to follow the financial action plan in the midst of all the pain of following a spend plan, in the midst of the financial pain of tracking my spending, in the midst of the financial pain of calling all my creditors and working out a repayment plan, in the midst of the financial pain of sitting before your security manager and letting him or her know what's going on, but also in the midst of financial victories of knowing that I'm finally doing something about it. And so with this psychological flow, by following the financial action plan, you can actually become so absorbed and immersed in this flow where it does create those changes in your brain that leads to all these wonderful things that I just mentioned. And emotion regulation, motivation, engagement, learning, and skill development, and increased focus and concentration, all those things occur due to the large amounts of those feel-good neurochemicals that are being released, such as dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, norepinephrine, and others. So dare I call this flow experience a natural performance enhancer? Or do I go a step further and call this flow experience a natural financial performance enhancer? You can increase flow by engaging in tasks that are meaningful to you and engage your skills and strengths. This goes back to burnout versus motivational skills, and I'll be sure to link that special episode in the show notes on delegating financial burnout. This is the same of behavioral activation and physical pain management. You choose the behaviors that are meaningful to you to move towards that something different that you're wanting in your financial lives. So, going back to the porch swing analogy to encourage this behavioral activation, I'm going to give you some daily financial behaviors according to the level of grit sandpaper you might need. So if we do 80 grit daily financial behaviors, this is what's going to increase awareness and removal of those core beliefs that are holding you back. The grimy thoughts, the moldy thoughts, the sickening thoughts, removing those altogether. And this 80 grit, it's the most abrasive yet necessary thing you must do to remove the unwanted, sickening, poor financial health perpetuating grime. And that might look like overspending, enabling behaviors, gambling behaviors, anything that has a tendency to stick around. You're essentially creating an awareness by seeing layer after layer of inflexible, rigid thought patterns left unchallenged and caking up what was once beautiful and new. This is the most painful step. It is 80 grit after all. Even dangerous, requiring you to wear some level of protective gear so the grime can't further harm you. So put your metaphorical goggles on and your metaphorical face mask on as you're doing all of this hard work. And how do I do that, Olivia? Well, because this is the most abrasive yet necessary step, it includes gathering the numbers, that awareness. In order to remove the curtain, you have to approach the numbers. Where have you been spending? What is your income? Pulling back that curtain on bank statements, credit reports, revealing what has been hidden or unseen all these years. And this, I say it's the most abrasive because it's the most scary portion of someone approaching a financial counseling session. And one of the reasons I require them to complete a cash flow analysis before they ever come in, because I know how difficult that process is. So it helps them at least move towards self-management and self-efficacy, because I didn't need Olivia here to at least gather the numbers. So I know I can do this on my own in the future as well. So that was the 80 grit daily financial behavior. Now you have the 220 grit daily financial behavior. And this is the kind of sandpaper pad you would use for refinement and smoothing things over. So for yourself, you could ask yourself, what is one thing I want to do today financially that my future self will appreciate? Again, you can see how that can be a refinement question. And for others, ask from a place of curiosity and non-judgment, what's one financial goal you're excited about? This can help you smooth things over with not only yourself, but with the people that you love, getting to know them even more in their financial worlds. It's a beautiful thing. And then finally, the sealant daily financial behavior. We're finally putting that sealant on the porch swing or on your financial behaviors. And this is protection. That sealant can even be seen as a balm or a salve for all the aggressive, uncomfortable things you had to do just to get to this point. So now you're going to be flourishing from this point forward. It's not as painful. And notice I said it's not as painful. Now I have this protection. Now I have this balm or salve that's going to seal in and solidify all that hard work. Then you have the I dids and attagirl or attaboys. And again, it offers an extra layer of stick-to-itiveness because you did it. You have a sense of self-efficacy and self-management. And then for protection again, you can even look at this financially, the protections that you put in place for your finances. That sealant can work as your estate planning, making sure your beneficiaries of designation are up to date, that you have the right person listed on there, that you have a will or a trust in place should something happen to you or other folks. And you have your guardians appointed if something happens to you and your spouse, and what happens to your children from there. You've named an executor that you can trust and know that if something happens, this person will help. And also for further protection, who do you invite into your life to now sit on and enjoy this swing? Who are you going to be allowing to speak into your life and having the ability to understand truth versus fraudulent or scamming behavior and sit with you financially throughout your lifespan? I hope this metaphor has been helpful, and thank you for attending another financial pain management clinic. I look forward to working with you in the future as it pertains to neuroplasticity, financial neuroplasticity, and how we can use our brain chemistry to get to those financial actions that we want to complete. Remember to rate and review the pod wherever you listen. I'll see you next time.